for the next 10 years post-grad, you're expected to work at minimum hour work weeks. My name is Eunice and I'm a doctor working in New Zealand if you're new here. In this video, I'm going to answer all the most frequently asked questions by you guys about being a doctor in New Zealand, how hard it is really to become one here, and all the best tips for getting into medical school. I'll read out all these comments and messages from this computer that I got from you guys and sort of answer them like I would to a friend. But I promise you that you won't find another YouTube video like this answering all the most important questions. Before I get into it, can I ask you a big favor to hit that like button below? It really helps with showing this video to more people who need to see this. This is the first question. How should I prepare for medical school while I'm still in high school? So I think there are a few things to think about when it comes to this topic. The first one is making sure that you're taking the right subjects or the best subjects to get you most prepared for medical school. What I would recommend is chemistry, physics, biology, and statistics. It doesn't really matter what your fifth paper is, but the Otago website formally recommends that you take one English rich subject, chemistry and physics. But in my opinion, if you are struggling to decide between calculus or statistics, I would always say go for statistics, and this is because calculus doesn't really help you in medicine whatsoever, but statistics does a whole lot. It will help you in that HEAL paper, or it's called Human Epidemiology paper, and it will also help you with appraising critically all the literature in medicine and when you become a doctor. The next thing that I think that you could really prepare yourself really well for before you go to med school is studying for the UCAT. And the UCAT stands for University Clinical Aptitude Test. It's this test that sort of assesses a range of mental abilities that's identified by the university as really important for health professionals. So it's kind of like a IQ, EQ sort of test that is very different from any sort of academic tests or exam that you would have taken in high school. It really pays off if you try and study for it while you're in high school, because in year 13 you don't really need to care about your grades as much because you're in university entrance, right? I'd much rather studied for UCAT then, so that when it comes to first year of health sciences there's not as much pressure on me to learn this whole new skill, this whole new way of thinking and answering questions. And the next thing that I thought about was, when you're in high school, this is the best opportunity for you to sharpen your study skills so that when you get to health sciences you're not fumbling around trying to figure out what's the best way to study for you, because if you're doing that then chances are you're going to fall behind really quickly at the start, and once you start falling behind the material just does not wait for you. It just piles up like more and more and more, and then you go into that sort of panic mode. And I saw a lot of that happening around me in my college. I'm glad that I had a first taster of using digital notes already in high school, so I already chose a way that I thought was effective of studying and I stuck to it and just focused on learning the new material. Those would be my 3 top tips about what you could do while you're in high school preparing for med school. Well, this is the second question. What is the best tip for studying lots and lots of content in medical school? So I got this one comment from, I think, a fellow medical student who is in India who is very distressed. So it says, whenever I start reading anatomy or any other subject, I get lost in the sea and vast syllabus and I can't figure out what to read and what to leave. I don't even understand what the professors are teaching. There are some apps, but they're quite expensive. I've becoming mad day by day as I can't read and retain all the things written in the book, and a queue of exams are waiting. So this is a very, very common scenario, especially when you first start out in medical school. I remember when I was sitting in lecture theatre and I thought, holy crap, how am I going to remember any of this? And this is only one lecture. There's like 120 slides and every page was full of content. So first, I just want to address that you're not alone. We can break this down into a couple of steps so that we can tackle each problem together. Okay, so the first one is you can't tell what's important. What I would do here is I would always go back to the learning objectives. Go to the start of your lecture slides or the start of your lab books and have a look at what are those learning objectives. What do they want you to learn for the upper limb? Like, is it every single insertion site and attachment sites of the muscles? Or is it more about learning the general concepts of what are the muscles in the forearm, for example? If that's not enough, then go find exam papers and have a look at anatomy questions that come up in the past exam papers. What sort of questions do they ask? Quite often you'll find that they repeat like similar questions, and you sort of have a better grasp of how in depth you're supposed to learn about that topic. Of course, you also look at the model answers. That is a very good place to start when you feel lost about what's important, what you need to learn, what you need to leave. And I also want to emphasize that after going through medical school, I just have to say that it's impossible to learn and remember every single thing. No one can do that. Even the people who are very, very smart and claim that they have photographic memory, it's not necessary when you are a doctor, because that's what devices are for. You search up things that you shouldn't need your brain to hold on to anyway. But I guess when you're a student, it's a bit different, but still focus on what is more high yield rather than focusing on the little details. The second thing is about resources. This is a bit of a difficult one. I did purchase a couple of anatomy resources, but I would always use free apps, things like Teach Me Anatomy. I go onto YouTube videos to look for cadaver videos. Those are really, really useful videos. Things that are not free are like Complete Anatomy 3D app. I found that really helpful though, and it was definitely a worthwhile investment. I don't think it's all that expensive either. I also use Netta's flashcards. If you can get a PDF file from somewhere, like you could pirate it or something. I didn't say that. I wouldn't get textbooks if I were you. I honestly spent like $200 on Grey's Anatomy, and I literally probably only read through 20 or 50 pages out of thousands of pages. So I would not recommend getting any textbooks and spending your money there. And third, you mentioned about you can't retain all the things written in the book. Third, I would just say don't use books, use questions to study, and then work backwards and study more if you have time. I have linked the How to Study for Exams video here just for medical school, so I hope that video will help you more. So now this is the next question that a lot of you guys have been asking. What tips do you have for med students entering the ward? This is such an interesting question that I really was excited to answer. The first one is checking in with your attitude. I remember back in my clinical years in med school, I always felt like, oh, okay, I'm gonna just try leave the ward as soon as possible because I've got more studying to do at home. I've got tutorials or lectures that I need to study for. And that was the mindset that I had. So I felt like I wasn't giving my 100% on the ward. Looking back, it's like such a waste of my opportunity because patients are your best study resources. I'm sure you guys would relate to this. You learn so much better when you're physically in front of the patient. You associate one disease to one patient and you remember their symptoms so much better because you're the one who assessed the patient. You heard those crackles yourself in those lung bases. You know exactly what heart failure looks like. You don't have to memorize it. It's just something that I really wish I could have done, is just spend as much time as I could and on the wards and not be shy to go up to patients and say, hey, do you mind if I examine you? Not sort of feel like I'm rushing to get home to do paper studying, I guess, because the best quality studying happens on the ward with your patients. The second thing is I want you to not think about what other people think of you when you're on the ward. The clinical team have very, very little expectations of you. They don't expect you to know a lot. We're just really happy that you're there, especially if you're keen to learn, you're asking questions. Like, we're stoked, but we do not expect you to know everything. And the more questions you ask, the more we know that you're interested and the more you gain out of this whole experience as well. Make sure you ask lots of those questions that you think are dumb, because this is the best time to ask those dumb questions. Like, the older you get, the higher you climb in your rankings in the hospital, the less acceptable it is that you ask these silly questions. Make the most out of your clinical years as med students. The last thing that I found really helpful as a clinical medical student is preparing myself well before I start every rotation. And how I do this is I would just go through my clinical handbook and just read through the chapter. Like, for example, I'm starting on hematology, then I'll just have a wee read about this chapter. It's probably only, I don't know, 50 pages max, of what are the most common conditions in hematology and what are the management plans, just so you get a good idea of what sort of conditions you're going to see on the ward, and that gives you more context and you don't go in just thinking, oh my god, what the hell is happening? Like, I don't even have a clue, all these names are foreign. If things get too complicated, always ask questions. Just ask the team, like, I don't know what's going on, can someone explain explain to me. Like, I know of this condition, I've read some things about it, but how does this relate to XYZ? Basically, don't go in to learn passively. Try to be an active learner. Think about the patient in front of you. Think of questions. If you feel like you're too shy to ask those questions, at least note them down so then you can go home and do a bit of research about it. Really take this opportunity to learn on the ward. This next question is, do you have good work-life balance working as a doctor? Well, it really depends on what you mean by work-life balance. If you're thinking work-life balance is working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, then no. Medicine does not have good work-life balance, at least not for the first 2 years as an intern. After that, it sort of depends on what specialty you choose. Most medical and surgical specialties, for the next 10 years post-grad, you're expected to work at minimum 60-hour work weeks with weekends, public holidays, and night shifts. I guess my definition of work-life balance is sort of changing every year, but a good work-life balance is when you have not only time but also energy for doing things that you love doing. For me, these are things like looking after my physical health, my mental health, relationships, friendships, and doing hobbies, making YouTube videos. Honestly, I have been really struggling to find balance per se. After starting in my new role as a registrar, because I've just stepped up as a medical registrar this year, having taken 1 whole year off not doing medicine. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I'll link it over here. But because of that, my first 2 weeks have been pretty good, but it's been a very, very steep learning curve coming back from medicine as well as stepping into a new role. I've been finding myself not having the energy or time to connect with the people around me, connect with my boyfriend, and doing any videos. If you're wondering why I haven't been posting videos, it's because I've been struggling with finding energy and time to do the things that I love. I'm really hoping that things will get better. I believe they will get better as I become more comfortable in this new job and get better at my job, I suppose. There is always time after you finish work. It's more about whether or not you have the energy to go through with your plans, which often I find that I lack that energy, and I end up spending most evenings coming back from work just lying on the bed and scrolling for social media. Yeah, something that I'm working on actively, guys, so yeah, watch this space. I might create a video on an update. Anyway, we're gonna move on to a lighter topic. What does a day in the life of a New Zealand resident doctor look like? As a medical registrar, I finished 2 years of internship, and this is what my day looks like. Officially, your duty starts at 8 o'clock, but like most people will arrive a little earlier, 7:30 or even 7 o'clock, to read up on patients, to see what's happened overnight. And then you go to the handover meeting, which is a big meeting full of doctors. The night staff is there that were looking after your patients overnight. They give you a handover of what's happened and new patients that they've admitted. Then after that, you go on to the ward round. This is where you get to see and assess every single patient under your team and come up with appropriate management plans and diagnosis and for the patient. And that's where most of the thinking happens. And then you endeavor to go get a quick lunch on time, and then after that you sit down and go through all the jobs. Those could be things like getting advice from other specialties, ordering those investigations, following them up, charting medications, running family meetings, contacting relevant people, and also making sure that all the paperwork and things are all set to go, so then the patient can also get discharged and out of the hospital. So that's a very important part of medicine as well. Paperwork is something that most people don't really talk about, but if the interns are not doing the paperwork, honestly, like, the hospital would not function. So you would finish around like 4:30 to 5 o'clock on a normal day, but on a long day, which is typically called like an acute or on-call day, you would be expected to do a 15-hour shift. From 8 o'clock to 2 or 3 o'clock, you're expected to look after your old patients, and then after you're done with the jobs, you then go downstairs to admit new patients for general medicine. Often, if there are sicker patients that are already waiting, then you just have to attend to the new patients first and then go do those jobs for your older patients a bit later. So you'll do that, and then you finish around 11 p.m. and that's 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's your 15-hour shift. and that's what it looks like. The next thing is, what are your hours like working as a doctor in New Zealand? So I've kind of answered it, and it's usually 8 to 9 hours on a normal day, and that sort of equates to about 60 hours per week, and that's usually the minimum. I've worked like 110 hours consecutively in a week over 10 days once, and that's my max. But a lot of my subscribers are doctors from India, sort of have been saying that, oh, you know, you guys don't do 24-hour calls 7 days a week, like you guys don't know what you're talking about when you're saying that work is tough. Yeah, I'm very grateful that I'm working in New Zealand, and I can see why you guys would like to move to New Zealand to work as doctors here. I am so grateful I'm not like doing 7 days on call 24/7. Like, that's just so unsafe. I don't know how you guys do it, but kudos to you guys. Absolutely amazing. I'll be covering a lot more about moving to New Zealand as an international medical graduate at the very end of the video, so if you're interested, make sure you stick around. We'll talk about this next question. How much do you earn as a doctor in New Zealand? We're very fortunate in New Zealand in that we're paid quite well compared to our UK colleagues in the NHS. According to Indeed, this website, UK junior doctors are getting paid like 30k pounds, which is equivalent to about 60k New Zealand dollars. And for me, as a PGY1 in New Zealand, I was paid 80k New Zealand dollars pre-tax, and then in my second year of internship, I was paid 100k pre-tax. Specialist salary is sort of on a very different scale. We're sort of talking about 20k New Zealand dollars per annum onwards, and that's the minimum. But keeping in mind, that is after many years of slaving away, doing those hours in the hospital that are mandatory, and also studying for exams and paying for those things, yada yada yada. I think it's well deserved. Then in Australia, they are paid a little bit more, and I have a video that goes into details about the salary of doctors in New Zealand versus Australia versus nurses, so make sure you check it out. Is it worth it to be a doctor in New Zealand in 2024? And if you were to choose again, would you do medicine? Ooh, this is a juicy topic. I think it really depends on what your values are, what you think is important in life, like what do you want to get out of life. Ultimately, I think medicine is a very fulfilling job. It's a very privileged job that allows you to serve people who are in their most vulnerable state, and having that power to be able to actually help someone get out of that, to get them into a better place. I don't think there's many jobs that fulfills that even comes close to what medicine offers. But if you're doing it solely because you think that being a doctor means you earn a lot of money, I can suggest that there are so many other career options out there that earns similar amount of salary per annum as doctors, minus the responsibilities, minus the things that we have to do, like life and death of people, minus all the postgraduate exams that we have to sit, and having very poor work-life balance. So as a whole, I feel like if you're thinking of doing medicine because of the money, I really encourage you to think twice and think really hard about it. But I feel like if I were to choose again, I would still do medicine, but in saying that, I can definitely see myself doing something different, like doing education in a manager role in some sort of corporate setting, because I love getting people to do stuff. So I'm very grateful that I am in this position and doing this job. I'm also grateful of the pay that comes with it because of the type of work that we do, I suppose. You know, this might be a bit controversial, but I do think that the amount of money that we are paid, we sort of deserve that. You can disagree with that, but I don't really care. Okay, I've just finished high school. I don't know how to choose between medicine and engineering. What should I do? This is so interesting because if you look at the jobs themselves, doctor versus an engineer, they are such complete different careers, right? Yet I also struggled back in my days when I was in year 12 and year 13 thinking about whether I should be pursuing engineering or whether I should be doing medicine. If we think about them, there are a couple things that these two careers have in common. The first one is they are both sort of careers that Asian parents approve of, I guess. Your Asian parents will say, oh yeah, my son's an engineer, my daughter is a doctor. So the things that your Asian parents will feel proud about. The next thing is that both jobs use a lot of logical sequencing and algorithm. So it's if X, then Y. And then in medicine, it's if pneumonia, then antibiotics. It's kind of similar sort of algorithm. What I would say to you is to ask yourself these two really important questions. The first one is, do you like maths and physics? And if the answer is no, then don't do engineering, in my opinion. And then this is the second question. Do you like people? And if that answer is a strong hell no, then don't do medicine. I mean, I can't say too much about engineering because I'm obviously not an engineer, but I can definitely say this about medicine. I can say for sure that if you hate people, you hate human interaction, then medicine is going to be a very, very tiring job for you. Because it's a very heavy people job. Like, you're seeing patients every single day, you're on the phone 24/7, asking for advice, giving advice, and you're working closely with a team of people, not just doctors. If people's not really your jam, then you'll find that you'll tire out even quicker. I think you'll burn out pretty quickly, even if you thought that you'd enjoy human biology and learning about treating medical conditions. I think that alone, that interest, is not enough. Not a good enough reason to want to do medicine, in my opinion. Are there any observership programs in New Zealand hospitals? So sadly, no, there are no formal observership programs in New Zealand, but from speaking to my IMG colleagues, it sounded like they did have that 10 years ago and they've scrapped that. I think you do have to apply to hospitals now yourself and try ask about these on your own. However, I do think that it is really not that easy to get these opportunities, these observerships under your belt, especially if you don't know anyone, like you don't have any connections. Yeah, when it comes to the hospital, it's all about connections and who you know. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is these are usually not paid as well. So you'll be spending all these unpaid hours on the ward and not be allowed to do anything because you're supposed to be supervised. But it is one of the surest and best ways for you to get employed at that same hospital if you have done a clinical observership program there after you've passed your NZREX exam, of course. Now this leads to the next part. How hard is it to get a job in New Zealand as an international medical graduate? So what that means is that you are a doctor and you have a degree overseas and you've worked there as a doctor for a couple of years and you want to move to New Zealand. How hard is it to do so? So there are two parts to getting a job in New Zealand. The first one is having to sit the NZREX exam. In order to even be eligible to sit the exam, you must have already passed any one of these exams. The AMC, PLAB, Canadian exam, USMLE, and the average pass rate for NZREX over the last 5 years is 60%, so that's not too bad. But after you pass, this is the second part, and this is actually the hardest part, is actually finding and getting a job. The reason why it's difficult isn't because of your skill set or your abilities per se, it's because you are competing against fresh graduates, fresh medical graduates from the country, and there's like 600 of them every single year at the end of December, and they all get priorities for those jobs, those PGY1 jobs. That makes your chances quite slim. But I have received tips from ex-IMGs who are now doctors in New Zealand. I'm also about to do a podcast with one of them who have kindly accepted to be on the video. That might come in a couple of weeks time, so make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But these are some tips that they've told me so far. They've said to apply for smaller centres. Places like Whangarei, Blenheim and Thames are really good hospitals to try. And if you can, show up in person with your physical CV instead of emailing them or calling them, because then they can attach a CV to a face and you're more likely to gain brownie points if you're there in person. If there are any further questions, let me know in the comments below. I hope this FAQ session has been helpful. This is my first time doing one, and if you want to hear more details about how to actually become a doctor in New Zealand, the nitty-gritty details, then you need to watch this video next.